They led her into the auction yard like she wasn't a person at all, just another item to be traded, bargained over, discarded when no longer useful. 19 years old, trembling under a threadbare shawl, she kept her eyes on the dirt because looking at the buyers only made the fear worse. Men shouted bids for cattle, for tools, for land rights, and then for her. A girl with no family, no money, and no say in her own future. The ranch owner who held her arm tightened his grip, announcing her value like he was reading off a price tag. Strong hands, quiet knows her chores, will start the bidding. But the yard fell strangely silent. No one stepped forward. No one raised a hand until one man, thin, dusty, and desperate, offered the only thing he had left, his tired old horse. The crowd laughed. The ranch owner didn't. A trade was a trade, and just like that she was sold, for a single horse. The man who bought her didn't meet her eyes as he dragged her toward his wagon. She could see it in him, resentment, frustration, disappointment. He hadn't bought her because he wanted to. He'd bought her because he needed someone to work, someone to blame when things went wrong, someone to carry burdens he couldn't. That was the moment she realized she wasn't a girl anymore. She was labor, property, a temporary solution to someone else's problems. And as the wagon rolled away from town, she tried not to cry, because tears only made men angry. She knew that lesson too well. But as the sun dipped behind the hills, someone stepped into the road ahead of them. A tall cowboy in a worn coat and dusty boots, his horse standing still beneath him like a carved statue. The man driving the wagon cursed and pulled the reins, ready to shout, but the cowboy didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift his weight. He simply looked at the girl, really looked, and something dark flashed across his face. The cowboy's gaze slid to the man holding her. "She with you?" His voice was low, even dangerously calm. "She's mine," the man snapped. "Bought her fair this morning." The cowboy nodded once, slow. "And what she cost you?" The man straightened proudly. "One horse." The cowboy dismounted. He walked to the back of the wagon, his boots crunching in the gravel, his hat shadowing his eyes. She held her breath. Nobody ever interfered. Nobody ever cared. But this man did something no one had ever done. He asked her name, quietly, gently, like it mattered. When she whispered it, the cowboy's jaw tightened and he exhaled through his nose as if calming down a wildfire inside him. Then he shrugged off his coat, warm, heavy, smelling faintly of cedar and smoke, and draped it over her shoulders without asking permission. The gesture was so simple, yet it felt like the world had shifted. The wagon driver stared, confused. "What are you doing?" The cowboy didn't answer at first. Instead, he pulled something from his saddle, a small leather pouch. He tossed it to the driver. It hit the man's chest with a dull thud, heavier than it looked. "Take it," the cowboy said, "and leave." The man opened the pouch and froze. Even she could see the glint of silver inside. "More than any horse, more than any woman should ever be priced at." "That's more than she's worth," the man muttered. The cowboy stepped closer, his voice a low warning. "Not even close." The man scrambled back onto his wagon, slapped the reins, and was gone in seconds, leaving a cloud of dust and a silence so deep she could hear her heartbeat. She stared at the cowboy, clutching the edges of his coat like she was afraid someone would snatch it away. Why did you do that?" she whispered. He looked at her with a softness that felt foreign, almost impossible. "Because no one should be sold," he said. "Not for a horse, not for anything." She shook her head, still trembling. "But I don't have anywhere to go." The cowboy offered her his hand, not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. "You don't owe me," he said. "You're not mine, you're free." The word hit harder than any blow she'd ever taken. Free. She hadn't heard that word in years. And when she finally placed her hand in his, it wasn't out of fear or obligation. It was because, for the first time since she was a child, someone had looked at her and seen a human being. The first step she took beside him felt unsteady, like her legs were remembering how to move without someone pulling or pushing them. The coat around her shoulders was far too big, hanging almost to her knees, but the weight of it made her feel anchored, grounded, safe in a way she had forgotten was possible. The cowboy didn't walk ahead or behind her. He walked beside her, matching her pace. Every so often his eyes flicked toward her, checking if she was cold or scared or about to collapse. She wasn't used to that kind of attention. People usually looked at her to measure her usefulness, not her well-being. "You hungry?" he asked quietly. She nodded, surprised by the lump in her throat. Hunger was normal, being asked about it was. When they reached his horse, he helped her up gently, his hand steadying her waist as if she were something fragile, not something traded for livestock hours earlier. She expected him to climb up behind her or in front, to steer the horse with a firm grip and treat her like luggage. Instead, he led the horse on foot, letting her sit higher than him, the reins loose in his hand. Every step of the journey felt unreal, like she was watching someone else's life happen. The rancher who'd bought her had tugged her along by the wrist so hard she'd thought the bones would crack. This cowboy hadn't so much as touched her without asking. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Calder," he answered. The name fit him, steady, unshakable, like something carved into stone. The sky darkened as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the plains in deep purples and blue-gray shadows. Calder stopped long enough to build a small fire in a sheltered hollow between two rocky ridges. She watched him work, efficient movements, quiet focus, no wasted energy. When the flames caught, casting warm light across his face, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. He looked tired. Not physically, though the lines on his hands told the story of hard work, but tired in the way of someone who'd carried too much alone for too long. She wondered if freeing her had awakened something in him, the same way it had awakened hope in her. When he handed her a tin cup filled with warm broth, her hands shook so badly she had to steady it with both palms. "Take your time," he murmured. As the fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the night, she finally found the courage to ask the question that had been burning inside her since the moment he stepped in front of the wagon. "Why me?" Calder didn't pretend not to understand. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the flames. For a long time he said nothing. Then slowly he replied, "Because I've seen too many people turned into things and I couldn't watch it happen again." She opened her mouth to speak, but he continued, his voice low. "My sister was taken when she was younger than you, sold, traded, lost. I couldn't save her." The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a wound far older than tonight. "But I could save you." The truth settled between them, heavy and aching. She felt her breath catch, not out of fear, but out of something like gratitude, something raw and overwhelming. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. Calder shook his head. "Don't be. You didn't cause what happened to her, and you didn't deserve what happened to you." He looked up then, meeting her gaze fully for the first time since the auction. His eyes weren't angry or pitying. They were steady. They were kind. "You're safe now," he said simply. And for the first time in years, she believed it. She sat quietly for a long moment, letting his words settle inside her like warm embers chasing out old shadows. Safe. It felt like a word that belonged to other people, people with families and homes and choices. Not girls bought and traded like livestock. Yet here, under the sweep of a star-filled sky, wrapped in his coat, she felt something easing in her chest, something she hadn't dared feel in years. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but sure. "What happens now?" Calder didn't answer right away. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward, then said, "Whatever you choose." She blinked, stunned by the simple power of the phrase, choose. The idea felt foreign. Choices weren't for people like her until now. Watched him, studying the way he kept his gaze on the flames, giving her space instead of pressure. She'd never had space, never had time to think or breathe or want. "I don't know how to choose," she admitted, her fingers tightening around the cup. Calder nodded as if he understood that all too well. "Then we'll figure it out, one step at a time." He glanced at her then, not with expectation, but with a quiet reassurance. "You don't owe me work. You don't owe me loyalty. You don't owe me anything." That sentence alone shook her more than the entire day had. No one had ever done something for her without expecting something in return. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. Calder shrugged lightly. "Because I wish someone had helped my sister." Her throat tightened as she set the empty cup aside, staring into the fire as if it held answers. "What if people come looking for me?" The thought had gnawed at her all evening, men with bad tempers and thick fists, men who saw her as a lost investment. Calder didn't flinch. "Let them come." His voice was steady, calm in a way that made her believe him.